A man can only truly be himself when he is alone. The moment he falls in love, he starts to change, often without even realizing it. That's not just poetic observation, it's a brutal truth laid bare by Arthur Schopenhauer. He didn't just ask if love was real, he tore it apart, examined its pieces, and exposed what most people are too afraid to see. There comes a moment in every man's life, a quiet, soul-splitting moment, when something cracks. The illusions he once lived by start to fade. He looks at the things he chased: love, companionship, the dream of a life shared with someone who swore they understood him. But then the question hits: what if it was all a lie? Schopenhauer didn't look away from that question. He leaned into it. Where the world saw romance, he saw seduction by nature itself. A trap. A trick. A beautifully designed illusion meant not to uplift but to enslave. Love, according to Schopenhauer, isn't some sacred salvation, it's suffering wearing a seductive smile. He saw through the fantasy. What the world calls intimacy, he called biology dressed up in poetry. What we think is connection, he saw as manipulation, natural, unconscious, but real. To Schopenhauer, the difference between men and women wasn't just physical, it was metaphysical. He believed that men were driven by ideals, ideas, and the pursuit of something higher. Women, on the other hand, were drawn to the immediate, the practical, the survival-driven. He famously wrote that women remain children their whole lives, not as an insult, but as an observation of nature's design. He believed they clung to the present moment, to appearance, to security. For him, this wasn't about superiority or inferiority. It was about understanding how nature programmed us differently. And beauty? To Schopenhauer, it was nothing but a mask, a lure, not a gift. A bait crafted by nature to pull men off their path. A tool not of love but of distraction. He believed a woman's beauty wasn't something to worship, it was something to be wary of. It weakens a man's judgment. It hijacks his focus. It turns a builder of dreams into a servant of urges. And the pattern plays out again and again. How many great men, artists, warriors, philosophers, empire builders, have fallen not to enemies or failure but to love, to a woman's voice, her softness, her presence. Schopenhauer argued that women, without the ability to dominate through brute force or abstract philosophy, mastered something far more powerful: subtlety, influence, emotion. He saw their power not on the battlefield, but in the bedroom. Not in the public sphere, but in the private one. Through charm, emotion, and need, they shaped the very men who shaped the world. And yet society celebrates this as love, as sacred, as romantic. But to Schopenhauer, it was a transaction dressed in vows. A biological strategy cloaked in poetry. Love, he said, is not a union of souls. It's not destiny. It's not fate. It's the will to life, a blind, impersonal force that drives us to reproduce. That doesn't care about your happiness, your dreams, or your peace of mind. It only cares about survival. And it's clever. It whispers fantasies. It tells you she's different. That this time, it's real. And by the time the truth sets in, you're already in too deep. Marriage, in Schopenhauer's view, wasn't a sacred bond. It was the final act of surrender. A contract not of love, but of resignation. A man thinks he's securing a life partner. But often, he's locking himself into a structure that drains him. He trades freedom for duty, vision for responsibility, solitude for noise. And what happens when the beauty fades? When the excitement wears off? Often, what's left is silence, resentment, disillusionment. The man who once had dreams, fire, and purpose now finds himself in routines, obligations, compromises. He used to create. Now he maintains. He used to search for truth. Now he searches for peace in distraction. Schopenhauer wrote, "Marriage is a trap set by nature. The bait? Her beauty, her warmth, her promise of companionship. But underneath it all, instinct, repetition. Nature continuing itself, indifferent to the soul of the man it uses to do so. This wasn't about hating women. Schopenhauer didn't cast them as villains. He saw them as unconscious agents of nature's design. Not malicious, just driven by deep, evolutionary forces. Their instinct is to seek security, to protect their own survival and the survival of their offspring. And to achieve that, they've developed tools of emotional mastery, intuition, subtle influence, charm. Men enter this emotional arena unaware. They bring logic to a realm ruled by instinct. They try to reason where they should resist. And they lose, again and again. Schopenhauer believed men become pawns in this system. They build the house, but it's no longer theirs. They work and strive, only to pour their energy into maintaining a life that often isn't truly theirs anymore. And yet they convince themselves it's noble. That the sacrifice is strength. That this is what it means to be a man. But underneath, many feel the ache. The loss. The voice they no longer hear. The fire that's gone cold. The sense that somewhere along the way, they stopped being who they were. Schopenhauer wasn't trying to break men down, he was trying to wake them up. To help them see through the illusion before it's too late. Because in his eyes, women don't destroy men. Men destroy themselves, by misunderstanding women. By romanticizing what is biological. By confusing desire with destiny. And when the fantasy fades, the cost isn't just heartbreak. It's identity collapse. Schopenhauer's brilliance wasn't in bitterness, it was in clarity. He stripped away the sugarcoating and looked at love without flinching. He saw men as noble beings, capable of great thought and creation. But vulnerable. Easily derailed by illusions. Capable of trading their higher purpose for a soft whisper and a hopeful promise. Once a man gives in to unchecked desire, Schopenhauer argued, he no longer serves his purpose. He serves hers. He reshapes his values. He quiets his voice. He becomes palatable, pleasing. And in doing so, he forgets who he is. And that, to Schopenhauer, was the greatest tragedy, not the death of love, but the death of self. What is the worth of a man who no longer remembers himself? Schopenhauer didn't believe most men were broken by war, or poverty, or struggle. He believed many are broken by love, or more accurately, by the illusion of love. The soft, seductive poison of emotional dependence. The quiet erosion of their will, their vision, their identity. And here's what makes it more tragic. Women don't even need to demand this obedience. Men offer it freely. They hand over their time, their strength, their ambition, not under force, but through desire. And so begins the slow fade. At first, it's the time he used to give to his passion. Then, it's the fire he once had for his purpose. Then, the silence he once needed to think, to create, to remember who he was. Slowly, one by one, the pillars of his inner world collapse, not in a single dramatic fall, but in quiet, daily sacrifices. The man who once stood with vision now kneels. Not in worship, in resignation. His joy becomes distraction. His dreams shrink to fit someone else's comfort. And society applauds this. They call it love, maturity, responsibility. But Schopenhauer wasn't buying it. He challenged the idea that this is growth. What if it's not evolution, but extinction? What if the man who bends to meet the expectations of love isn't rising, but fading, losing the very essence that once made him who he was? The awakened man, Schopenhauer believed, sees through this. He doesn't hate women, he simply understands them. He doesn't reject love, but he respects it as a force that can destroy just as easily as it can inspire. He protects his soul from being consumed by illusions that wear the mask of happiness. This isn't a call to isolation, it's a call to awareness. To stop and ask the hard questions. Am I who I was meant to be? Or have I become someone else just to keep the peace? Just to be desired? Just to avoid being alone? Schopenhauer's voice is not shouting. It's quiet, but relentless. A whisper that cuts through the noise. A challenge that echoes through time. And what it's asking is simple. Are you awake? Or are you living someone else's dream? In Schopenhauer's world, the highest form of man isn't the lover. It's not even the hero. It's the philosopher, the one who sees the structure of the game and refuses to play blindly. The one who turns away from applause, from approval, from the seduction of comfort, and chooses instead the harder path, the path inward. Detachment, to Schopenhauer, was not loneliness. It was liberation. Only when a man steps back from the illusions of love, the constant pull of desire, and the noise of modern expectations, only then can he hear the truth of who he is. Only then does he stop serving roles and start living from essence. He pointed to men like Buddha, the Stoics, the saints, those who walked alone, not because they were unloved, but because they refused to be owned. They weren't avoiding love. They were avoiding being defined by it. They chose clarity over comfort, stillness over stimulation. In solitude, Schopenhauer saw strength. Not dominance over others, but mastery of the self. The man who can sit with his own thoughts and not feel anxious, who can be alone and not feel empty, that man cannot be controlled. He doesn't chase illusions. He doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't build his identity on shifting ground. This path isn't for everyone. Most people will call it cold. They'll say it's cynical. But Schopenhauer didn't write for the many. He wrote for the few. For the man who's felt the pain of chasing love that left him hollow. For the man who built his life around promises that were never kept. For the man who now wants something real, not affection, not validation, but truth. And the truth, Schopenhauer said, is hard. A man who doesn't understand his desires is ruled by them. A man who doesn't understand women is vulnerable to them. And a man who builds his life around the hope of romantic fulfillment is building on sand. So what's the alternative? To wake up. To choose your mind over your moods. To love your purpose more than your praise. To fall in love not with the fantasy of someone else, but with the clarity that comes when you finally stop looking outward for completion. Because when a man can sit in silence, feel no ache for more, no hunger for attention, no desperation for approval, that is the man who is free. And make no mistake, freedom, in Schopenhauer's world, wasn't about doing whatever you want. It was about not being controlled by what you want. That's what separates the philosopher from the puppet, the builder from the believer, the man who sees from the man who dreams. So if something in this message hit you hard, if it stirred something you weren't ready to feel, don't run from it. Sit with it. Let it burn. Let it strip away the stories you've been told about who you need to be. Let it clear the fog and reveal the foundation. You were never meant to live a life of quiet surrender. You were never meant to trade your fire for comfort. You were meant to rise. Not because someone told you to, but because you remembered who you are. Let Schopenhauer's words be your mirror, not to make you bitter, but to make you see. And once you see clearly, you can't unsee. If you've made it this far, it means something inside you refuses to look away. That quiet part of you, the part you've buried under noise, distractions, and responsibilities, it's still alive, still watching, still waiting. And maybe, just maybe, it's tired of being ignored. Schopenhauer didn't write to entertain. He wrote to awaken. His truth was not sugar-coated for comfort. It was carved for clarity. He knew that comfort deceives, that love romanticized becomes love misunderstood, and that misunderstanding, especially of women, of desire, and of self, is a trap few men escape. The real tragedy? Most men never even realize they're in the trap. They think they're choosing love. But what they're really doing is surrendering, slowly, incrementally, until one day they look in the mirror and no longer recognize the man staring back. He doesn't create. He doesn't search. He doesn't burn. He maintains. He manages. He exists. And the worst part? He tells himself this is noble. But Schopenhauer's challenge was this: what if it's not nobility, but numbness? What if you're not maturing, you're muting yourself? What if you're not building a life, you're burying a self? He warned men not out of resentment for women, but out of reverence for truth. Women, in his eyes, were not evil. They were instinctive. Nature's most elegant strategy to continue the species. And nature doesn't care about your dreams. It cares about results. Continuation. Reproduction. Security. And so women, consciously or not, seek what nature demands: stability, provision, safety. Their power doesn't lie in conquest, but in influence. Not in force, but in persuasion. They shape outcomes not by building, but by guiding the builders. By becoming the reason why men shift their path, dull their fire, redirect their purpose. It's not intentional cruelty. It's evolution. It's instinct. And yet men walk into this battlefield unarmed. They fall in love with illusions, with softness, with words whispered in moments of vulnerability. And they forget, nature doesn't need your dreams. It needs your obedience. So Schopenhauer urged men to wake up, not to become heartless, but to become whole. To no longer let desire define them. To stop handing over their identity in the name of temporary affection. Because when a man builds his life on the emotional approval of another, he's no longer living, it's performance. He starts bending his truth to avoid arguments. He edits himself to remain desirable. He sacrifices silence for company, vision for validation, and in time, soul for survival. And all the while, the fire inside him dies. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly. Until one day, he doesn't remember what it felt like to be fully alive. Schopenhauer's answer? Step back. Observe. Detach. Not from life, but from illusion. From the belief that fulfillment comes from someone else. From the fantasy that love alone will complete you. From the lie that you must shrink to be accepted. Instead, he pointed to solitude, not as suffering, but as sanctuary. The place where real men are made. In silence, in stillness, in the space where you remember who you are when no one is watching and nothing is expected. That's where power begins. Not the kind of power that rules over others, but the kind that can't be ruled by anything. The power to walk away, to stay grounded, to choose truth even when it's lonely. To create not because someone told you to, but because it burns inside you. Most will reject this. Most will say it's too harsh, too cold, too detached. But Schopenhauer wasn't writing for the masses. He was writing for the few, the men who are ready to see, who are tired of being lied to, who are willing to face the cost of clarity. And make no mistake, there is a cost. When you stop chasing illusions, you lose the comfort they offer. When you no longer play the game, you become the outsider. But what you gain is something greater: freedom, focus, fire. Because once you stop needing love to complete you, you can love from strength, not from hunger. You can connect without losing yourself. You can give without being drained. You can desire without being devoured. Schopenhauer's vision of manhood wasn't lonely, it was luminous. He saw the awakened man not as bitter, but as sovereign. A man who doesn't ask, "Will she love me?" but instead asks, "Am I living my truth?" A man who doesn't need to be understood, because he understands himself. So let me ask you this. Are you that man? Or are you still chasing shadows? Have you traded your mission for her mood? Your silence for her smile? Your soul for a seat at a table you were never meant to beg at? You don't have to answer out loud. But if something inside you stirred, don't ignore it. Let it speak. Let it burn. Let it burn away the lies, the expectations, the false identities. Because here's the truth. You were not made to be half of something. You were made to be whole. You were not made to be pleasing. You were made to be powerful. And you were not made to live asleep in someone else's dream. You were made to awaken. So if this video cracks something open in you, don't let it end here. Like it. Share it. Send it to the man who's on the edge of forgetting himself. Subscribe for more. Because this isn't just content, it's a movement, a reminder, a call to return to your fire. And if you believe in the mission, if you want to help this message reach more men who need it, consider joining the channel or supporting through the link in the description. Because in a world built on distraction, the truth is rare. But once you hear it, you can never go back. And maybe that's what freedom really is. The moment you see clearly and refuse to be blind again.